WestCon was founded in 1903 as the debate over whether women should have the right to vote was reaching its zenith. WestCon was established to train teachers, at first all women, to fulfill the state's mandate for public education.
It was partly women like the students at WestCon who were employed outside the home that exposed the hypocrisy of excluding half the voting age population from full citizenship.
2019 marks the centennial of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which made it a women's constitutional right to vote. The following exhibit is a sampling of some of the items in the WCSU Archives that highlight this pivotal period from the 1890s until the early 1920s.
Though women's struggle for the right to vote began much earlier, we begin this exhibit with objects from the 1890s.
Saturday, August 19th, 1893, was the first day that Danbury allowed women to register as voters. Connecticut had just passed a law that allowed women to vote in school board elections. This was later expanded to allow voting in library matters.
The WCSU Archives holds the 1893 Danbury Voter Registry. From it, we learn that 3 women registered that August Saturday. Emma Haddon Heath of 246 Main Street was first, followed by Aksa Doshi Kerrigan and Susan Street.
2 of the women worked in hat factories. Heath and Kerrigan were hat trimmers, and Street likely also worked in the industry. Aksa Doshi Kerrigan and Susan Street remained in Danbury and were among the Danbury women who, as fully enfranchised voters, cast their ballots in the 1920 election. They are listed in the 1920 ledgers of Danbury women voters.
Emma Heath, on the other hand, did not vote in the 1920 election. We can trace her history through a combination of census records, newspaper articles, and books.
Emma Hayden Heath was born in 1825 in Massachusetts. She married her first husband, Charles Hayden, in Hartford, Connecticut in 1847. Around 1885, she married her second husband, Alfred Heath, who died shortly after in 1886.
Emma Heath was active in the community. She was a founding member of the Hat Trimmers Union, president of the Hat Trimmers Mutual Aid Association, and president of the Fortnightly Columbian History Club.
Sometime after 1893, Heath moved to Schenectady, New York, where she died in 1902. Her obituary appears in the Danbury News-Times and is available on microfilm in the Haas Library.
She is buried with her brother in Worcester Cemetery, a short walk away from WestCon.
As hat trimmer Melinda Scott summarized the situation in the early 1900s, quote, "If women had the ballot, they would have passed the 54-hour bill. I do want the ballot to be able to register my protest against the conditions that are killing and maiming."
Melinda Scott was perhaps echoing what Emma Heath and other hat trimmers in Danbury were feeling with regards to the vote.
By the end of the 19th century, suffrage associations had sprung up around the country. The Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association was founded in 1869, and by 1900, it was a formidable organization which would have kept people like Danbury's Emma Heath informed of the movement's progress.
The WCSU Archive has a few issues of the CWSA's Suffrage News Bulletin. However, the predominant stereotypes of women persisted and differed little from what was asserted in 1800. WCSU has in its collections a work by Thomas Gisborne, An Inquiry into the Duties of the Female Sex. Gisborne, an Anglican priest, laid out for an early 19th century audience what he felt were the differences between men and women. Gisborne's views on how to educate women, how women should choose a husband, raise children, and spend free time were widely praised, even considered progressive by some. Author Jane Austen read and praised the work. WestCon's copy is inscribed by Mary Ann Houblin in 1797. Houblin, like Gisborne, was from Derbyshire, England. Houblin married in 1797. Her having the book in her library may have been linked to her wedding in that year to John Archer Houblin.
As is made clear by these postcards from the early 20th century, also in WCSU's collections, women's roles were presented as comical, and their subjugation based on these stereotypes perpetuated the male-dominated landscape. It was this deep bias that women, even amongst themselves, had to challenge and subdue in order to win the vote.
To counter the deep societal bias against women, the mass media of the time, print, was used to promote the women's suffrage movement.
WestCon has a small collection of tracts, pamphlets, and literature that document this period. Here are some examples of pro-suffrage publications in WestCon's collections.
One of the most compelling group of artifacts in the WCSU Archive are the voter rolls of women voters for the election of November 1920. Included in these ledgers are Asa Doshi Kerrigan and Susan Street, who were among the first women to register in 1893.
In the fall of 2019, Dr. Linda Nauer's Women's Studies 210 class researched a group of women voters selected at random from the 1920 voting ledgers. This research shows a cross-section of women who chose to exercise their newly won right to vote.
Not surprisingly, many of the women who first voted in Danbury were employed in the hatting industry.
Also not surprising were the presence of Danbury Normal School students on the voter rolls. One of the students was Bertia Stewart of the class of 1917, the first African American to graduate from WestCon.
Bertia Stewart and her sister are checked off to show that they voted in the 1920 election.
Another interesting artifact in the WCSU Archives collections is a 1963 student interview with Elsie Hill. Hill was from Connecticut and worked closely with prominent suffragist Alice Paul.
Was this the beginning of your interest in women's rights?
Well, of course, I was conscious of the European attitude towards women when I was there at 17, because you couldn't go, especially a blonde person as I was, couldn't go out in the streets alone. The girls couldn't go out in the streets alone in either Paris or London or Rome. They didn't have the freedom of going out. My sister, she was already a suffragist, and I was not. I thought I was more advanced than she, and I didn't realize exactly what the whole thing involved. That's something that you can learn in the beginning if somebody ever opens it up to you, that as long as you find that because of your sex, anything can be that is normally human when looked at from Mars, let's say, an adult, educated citizen who was competent to do something and was interested to do something. If you are barred in any field solely because of sex and not because of incompetence, then your whole status is inferior.
According to Catherine Adams and Michael Keynes' Alice Paul and the American Suffrage Campaign, quote, press efforts began with preparation for the first parade in March 1913, which was led by Paul and Elsie Hill, a daughter of Congressman Ebenezer J. Hill from Connecticut, who had graduated from Vassar and was teaching French at Washington High School. Each day, Paul wrote press bulletins, and Hill came in after school to take them to the newspapers.
Hill was on the Congressional Union of Women's Suffrage's Executive Committee, and after the passage of the 19th Amendment, she chaired the National Women's Party's Convention and later chaired the party's National Council.
I'm Brian Stevens.
I'm Stacy Haponik. We're the archivists at WestCon.
This exhibit and video are meant to showcase a few things in our repository that relate to this pivotal event's centennial.
While this exhibit exists physically in the Haas Library atrium, we are providing this video at a time when visiting WestCon's library and archive is restricted.
There's a lot we can help you with remotely, and we'd be happy to direct you to our materials as well as the many repositories around Connecticut who have materials on the suffrage movement.
Thanks for watching.